You are now watching the final week, the final day, and indeed the final match of this season of Hearthstone Grandmasters, at the very least for the Asia-Pacific region. There will be Europe and then Americas to follow shortly after, but for myself and Gia, as well as all the rest of the players here in Asia-Pacific, this is going to be our final send-off for this season. And what a way to go out, Gia. Glory and Surrender, the two best performing players this season, capping it out with a perfect final with these two titans.
I am so hyped. No other words, Dart. You put it perfectly. These two have had the greatest performance, the most consistency, and very, very high level of play throughout the entirety of Grandmasters. They had straight through in the playoff brackets runs without dropping a series going up to this point, and they had very great scores all the way back to Swiss and throughout the round robin.
They did indeed. And it all comes down to this now, Gia, with, for the first time we're seeing here for Glory in a little while, a slightly different ban strategy from his opponent, because obviously not a true mirror as we are seeing from a lot of the matches today, given that Warrior has predictably been banned away from Surrender, and I suppose also predictably based on what we've seen from him so far, Surrender banning out the Demon Hunter yet again, even despite him almost getting caught up on his own Demon Hunter in the previous series against Possessi.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as the series is over, I feel like it would be great to finally get to pick Surrender's reign and possibly Rivious's as well, because the competition will be over for this season to see what the theory really is behind banning out Demon Hunter over Warrior. Despite all of us, and I think also Surrender and Rivios recognizing that Warrior has the highest win rate overall, it might be that small discrepancies in its matchup against Druid and against Highlander Hunter in particular are making all the difference for Surrender. But we won't get to hear it from his mouth. We get to see it in his actions. Can he take the win once again?
Cannot wait to find out. But before we get into that, any of the Demon Hunter or Warrior nonsense, we are starting again, Gia, with a classic matchup for the last couple of weeks. Druid up against Warlock. But this time, thankfully for both of our players, it's not like with Alutemu or Possessi earlier on in the day, where they had their very weird take on Druid. Personally, I remain very unconvinced where they cut the Ysera, had the double Soul of the Forest. Now for Surrender on his Druid, he has the much more old school approach here with the Ysera, one Wild Growth, one Soul of the Forest, and I think he's in a very good spot to start things off with a win here against Glory's Warlock.
That's right. Throughout this weekend, we've seen 3 takes on Druid. The one Surrender is bringing very close to the standard, and also Glory is bringing. Then we've seen the deviation in the direction of Rivius, which I feel is the future of Druid, and also Alutemu and Possessi, maybe teching, in our opinion, at least a little too heavily towards aggro and sacrificing that late game potential. Speaking of late game potential, Surrender has that overflow and the early game to back it up perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, he's making the late game into the early game right now. The only consideration for me is whether you hold on to the overflow, because the Fungal Fortunes can get you in that awkward situation where you have a lot of cards you don't want to dump, but you have to draw the 5 cards with the overflow. I wouldn't be too surprised to see it go by the wayside here.
I wouldn't be surprised either, but given how important it is to have chains of threats as Druid, I think I'd be more inclined to keep it here were I in Surrender's shoes.
Yeah, I guess on like a turn 3, or very possibly on the overflow turn, you could throw down a couple of Bog Beams or Moonfires or whatever in order to make room. And at the same time, it doesn't have to be a turn 7 play, it's just there as a backup to draw back up to the full hand.
And with that Innervate, we could just see also an earlier Overgrowth.
Good point.
Would have been easier to flesh out the game plan had he been on the coin, but there's always room for a little bit of deviation in the long-term game plan as Druid, and I feel that's where we get to see the truly experienced players shine.
So the standard game plan to go for here, I believe, as Glory, has proven to be, even when you're on the coin, still going for the tap first here. That seems to be the way the Japanese players in particular are approaching the matchup.
You tend to see tap into the coin Netherwing, for example, to deal with a Glowfly, at which point you have enough space in hand to go for questing tap and get the maximum number of draws down possible while also responding to a board. So now Surrender is running into that problem you were talking about.
Mm.
With the hand space issues, I still feel like we are going to see... I was going to say the Rising Wings, but now that he's innervated out the Overgrowth, I think this makes for cleaner mana expenditure because he can just play 3 2-cost cards next turn.
Yeah, the other consideration was going like Vate and double 2-drop this turn. But I like just going for it this way around. You can then just dump your cards very easily on the following turn, whilst getting the immediate more mana available.
Yes, it's perfect. So we could see now Eagle Wrath, the next band. It ends him up with 5 cards in hand. Then he could play Overflow, go to 10, but he'll guaranteed at least have the Moonfire to dump later on.
Mm-hmm.
Full 3 damage, no cycle, and both Rising Winds used for minions. I think this will signal to Glory that he knows what's coming up next.
Yeah, it was a card kept in the mulligan, and you're unlikely to be playing like this if it is the Mount Seller, because you, of course, want to give yourself as much fuel as possible. But I suppose for Glory, that's a good thing. You know, you'd rather have an extra turn to prepare by seeing the Overflow first than seeing the Mount Seller first.
And now he has a Crazed Netherwing response. It's not the Glowfly board, but Surrender's clearly signaled he's not going for the Glowfly plan just yet. So I think it's fine to expend one here.
Any minion that can be picked up here is absolutely huge for Surrender, not only because of the immediate threat it presents, but also just because it's guaranteed to not be discarded later on off of the Fungal Fortunes, which we've seen one too many times in this matchup already.
Indeed. It's pretty rough for Surrender. Not only did he not hit any of the 3 minions, he's also not hit either Glowfly, which means after he dumps presumably a Moonfire, he is looking to dump cards again towards another Overflow, but these are cards that you don't want to just be dumping. You want to be pairing them with Mount Seller.
So what I will say here is that Surrender has been a player who has been willing to overdraw cards in order to make dumping his hand easier, which that would accomplish it. You know, if he gets rid of anything that isn't Ysera or Mount Seller, he's pretty happy about it, because then he gets to get rid of his hand quicker going into the Overflow, sorry. But because 3 out of these 14 cards are pretty crucial to take the win, I can understand just getting rid of it here.
I'd argue 5 at this point with the Soul of the Forest in hand. I don't think he wants to overdraw Glowfly either. So I completely agree with the Moonfire tossed here. Slow turn for Glory is a welcome sight for Surrender. Okay.
Ooh.
1 mana short from being able to do the good stuff. Could just see him ramp up to 10.
I like the look of that. The Savage Roar is something I was considering playing out this turn with the Bog Beam, but I think now that he has the Glowfly, it becomes a little bit too important to just guarantee that those actually do something and push for lethal.
The Roar is very, very important in the matchup, I think. The difference between having both available and just one is huge as far as the knowledge you're giving your opponent. Sometimes they get to play too scared, as Glory demonstrated versus Alutamu. Not to say that Alutamu's plays were strictly wrong, but he did just put out a tweet that he feels he could have done something a little bit better in this particular matchup from the Warlock point of view.
So getting rid of the cheap cards here makes sense to me. Clearing out their hand, setting up for Glowfly Swarm on the following turn. Still pretty much a full suite as long as he gets a spell next turn.
Right.
So very scary for Glory.
Counted it all up, and Surrender will then just be sitting on Double Power and Savage Roar. But Glory on this turn can at least put a threat, quote unquote, on the board. I hesitate to call this a threat.
It's the problem with this version of the deck. Yes, it helps against the Demon Hunter, as we saw for Possessi earlier on in the day up against Surrender. But in this situation, you just imagine the difference between a 3-4 or a 9-9 being thrown down on the board with a 2-2 to boot.
Of course it's the right way.
I can imagine the difference. It's 6-5 plus 2-2. It's 8-7 is the difference. Oh, hand dumping as well, just to make sure he can get more taps, and he loses the other Netherwing?
Ooh.
That's a disaster now.
Look at
He
his
could have
hand.
had potential to deal with both layers if he draws Rain of Fire. Oh, actually, there wouldn't have even been enough mana. Just
This
looks like
answers absolutely nothing at the moment. Even if he hits Twisting Nether off the top, not enough mana. Zephyrus, not going to be active. He's played both Netherwings now as well.
Oh my goodness. Just looks like game.
Moarg into Rain of Fire? That is...
Not dealing with the second layer, even if it manages the
Yeah.
first. So, but of course, from Glory's perspective, he has to play as though the lethal won't be there, and so he could go for Moarg tap Rain of Fire for the full 20 damage procs, but that still doesn't get through everything quite. And so it would just have to be the Moarg Rain, even to deal with the first layer.
Yep.
I wonder.
It's the absolute best he's got, the only play that even gives him a chance. But I think Surrender knows, with no mana left available, he could take the first game and bring himself up to a great start in the series. An expected win for sure, but if Glory could have turned this around, he'd be in such a good spot.
Absolutely insane. Surrender had a perfect starting hand, and also I think very good recognition of how to dump his cards most efficiently. The Innervate Overgrowth into Eagle Wrath being the key point there. And there you have it. Game 1 in the books.
Very nicely done there by Surrender. Good understanding, as always, of the matchup. It's one of those things that I think I need to keep bringing up with Surrender, is that we very often almost gloss over the fact of how well he's playing, because it's just what he does at this point. It's good play after good play after good play. It's just what you've come to expect from him. And it would be a big reason why we could see him to be the first player to go through to 2 consecutive global finals / world championships.
That would be a feat in itself, especially if you include his previous World Championship appearances. I distinctly remember at the one where Tom60229 was champion. All the years are blurring in my head because we had 2 in 2019 and none in 2018, so I guess it was 2017. But yes, Surrender, the point here is he's a very, very good player up in the series, got a win with the Druid, so no chance of queuing that into Warrior anymore. And now he still has his pet deck and the Demon Hunter, which is one of the strongest decks in the meta. Looking in a great spot.
Yeah, I think Surrender's looking very, very strong here. Obviously, Glory has the ace in the hole in Warrior that he can bring out at any point. Should be able to take a win against Demon Hunter, and I think still very possibly able to take a win against the Highlander Hunter as well, despite, of course, Surrender's very strong play that we've consistently seen with the Highlander Hunter. But first of all, Gia, one of the matchups that, correctly or not, I kind of pegged as being one of the absolute worst matchups at the moment in Warlock versus Hunter, especially when the player piloting that Hunter is Surrender. I think the Warlock is in a miserable position.
Have to agree with you, and that's rough. I think Glory would have preferred to land this into Demon Hunter, but again, of course, Conquest, Q order, blah, blah, blah. At some point, you got to rip the Band-Aid off, as you said, and run into a bad matchup, but we will get into that match as soon as possible, I hope. I am hearing game sounds.
Yes, hearing game sounds could be a test game that we sometimes do just to make sure everything is running smoothly. But while we are waiting, taking a look at these specific builds. Oh, wait, no longer. Yeah. Brilliant. I won't even have to waffle on about any nonsense. Gia, we're heading into it. Take us through the starting hands.
Sadly, I didn't get to see the mulligans. It is my content. But, of course, Surrender has a pretty good opener with the Scavenger's Ingenuity, able to get him ideally Zixor for the turn 3 play, but also Imprison Felmo, which you want to get down as soon as possible to make sure that it's active on a turn where the stats are about relevant for its size. On turn 4, it is a 5/4.
quickly.
It's a really tough decision though, because if
Yeah.
you play the Felmaw here, it makes the Scavenger's Ingenuity quite awkward to play at any other point.
But then again, if you're playing out the Scavenger's Ingenuity here, you're likely not playing Felmore until like turn 5, unless you want to go Felmore and Ooze on turn 4, which is valid. That's definitely a way you could approach the matchup.
Surrender's graduated from tea into snacks now for the final. But the Zixor, of course, looks pretty clean here. Takes a nice trade on the Questing Explorer and starts the pressure.
Obviously, Zixor is looking very juicy here. The problem is, of course, gets it down to 4 health after a trade, which is perfect for a wide array of Warlock removal, be it Dark Skies, although that might be overkill. I'm thinking more Soulfire and Nether Breath, which would be scary for Surrender for sure.
It is convenient removal, but I'd argue that if you see a Nether Breath for 0 healing or a Soulfire for discard, you'd be pretty happy as Surrender.
Good point.
Especially if that takes up the whole turn.
Yeah, Soulfire would allow a tap as well, but as you say, a discard here is a little annoying for the Warlock.
Well, Glory can go for the maximum swing potential, if you want to call it that, with the questing into Soulfire. But he's holding back altogether to juice up that Dark Skies. Now Surrender can think about just playing the... see, wait, he did the thing! You said the Yarla thing, it's not just a Yarla thing.
It's the Surrender thing. Okay, fair enough.
Thank
The
you.
things that will happen, you do them first, and then you think. It makes sense.
Okay, I was gonna say there, thinking about Dragonbane, of course, but this is a much different situation to when he made that play against Possessi in the matchup, whereas it did play around just Dark Skies, where here it plays directly into Dark Skies. So I much prefer that he goes a little bit wider, finds a window to get down this Felmaw, and if it's a good boy, it's gonna go face.
I agree completely. I think that especially as he has the play next turn of just like Dragonbane plus Battle Mage, which plays very nicely around Crazed Netherwing, because if that does come down, he has either the face or the 5/5 for it to trade into. And with Glory going for it here, it's really not that amazing of a Crazed Netherwing board at all, and he's going to take a lot more damage in the process.
He was with just 1 minion, but for Glory, he was hoping that it could at least challenge this Zixor, but that is an incredible top deck for Surrender now. Desert Spear plus Weave It In.
Well, the question for me is, do you trade the 4/1 at all? Is it too greedy and too weak to Mortal Coil to get it to go face? Your opponent just coined out a 5-drop. What does that tell you?
It tells me he's desperate to get something on board, because he knows that it's getting past the point where the Dark Skies can't outpace if he doesn't have minions to soften up. But it's not just Coil, right? It's also Rain of Fire. Second, Nether Wing.
Right, but the thinking is, if that does happen, then you can go for the Dragonbane Hero Power, which at that point means you have a half the time you're just taking it out for free anyway. I really like the face hit here.
Okay.
And also, not to mention that the Rotnest Drake being picked up is absolutely incredible here.
Of course it's the right way.
Big deal also that he manages to get down the Primordial Drake, which challenges the Netherwing on its own.
Primordial Explorer, you're doing my thing.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's my mistake. Get your own.
You said Rain of Skies a while ago. Are we
enough.
doing mistake appropriation now? Is this what this is?
Many possibilities.
Okay. Gut instinct is to just Soulfire this, even though it feels icky. Look away and rip the Soulfire. I think Glory needs to hold on to this board control he has for dear life.
Almost out of time.
Oh, then again, like, there's so much more to consider, because if a 5/4 trades into your Drake next turn, that's awful as well.
Wow. bravest tap I have ever seen, but he gets the Nether Breath, has a Moarg in hand. Of course, it's a good boy. What?
This could just be lethal on this turn.
Oh my gosh. And even if it isn't lethal, if it hits the 5/5, that's a great outcome still for Surrender. Even the worst quote-unquote outcome of hitting the 2/3, at worst, he gets to stick the Dragonbane itself and then just trade his Primordial Explorer to protect it from dying to the Netherwing.
But I will say what this is like, Gia. It's like when you're playing a video game and you're just about to defeat the final boss. You've been playing it for like 10 minutes and you're on that tiny last bit of health and you get greedy and you go too much for the lethal. You can miss.
Okay.
And then if they have the heal, you can be in a rough situation because now Glory does have the ability to go Moarg into the Nether Breath, which could heal him up way out of range.
I mean, you say way out of range. It's
A little
putting
bit
him
out of
up
range.
to 12. But is that the second Nether Breath? Oh my god. Okay, that is well out of range now. I completely agree. Surrender sees the first one, has a side, sees the second one. We see the head turn, of course.
And this
Big
means his
yikes.
board obliterated through, health way back up. This now gets scarier for Surrender. He's definitely not out of the game, not by a long stretch here, but it's far from automatically won.
He had that great opener, but also has a hand that scales well into the mid game. He can take back the board with this Poisonous, even still surviving. Gets to throw down a Bone Chewer or the button if he likes. The problem with the Rot Nest is that he's not able to develop the Desert Spear for this turn, which he would really like to for the Varanus, but I agree that getting the body on board right now is much more relevant. Debating sending this face because he has seen another wing. And roughly equivalent to Dark Skies. So it's the difference between 2 free damage in the face of a Dark Skies versus losing the Nether, the Rot Nest Drake in the face of second Netherwing.
Yeah, exactly. Now that he's gone face, he's left himself incredibly vulnerable to a crazed Nethering because he doesn't even have a great response to that if that does come down.
Actually, the taunt is great here though. Prevents not just a Netherwing, but the Dark Skies as well.
Sure.
If the questing trades in, there's still 10 health left on the board. We can see Glory go for Rain of Fire into Dark Skies, but that's asking for a two-card combo instead of just one.
So many
Thankfully we can see, for Glory's sake at least, he's got everything he needs to be able to clear off this board, and he can follow up into some pretty powerful plays afterwards as well.
Going for Caladan instead. Okay, can get behind it. So that Griffin gets either Faceless or Zixor Prime for Surrender.
I think so, yeah.
And one of those is better than the other.
I won.
But even Faceless is not the worst proposition if he has Desert Spear. The problem is that he has the turn 9 locked up.
I mean,
like, there's a lot of powerful combos to be seen, but none of them trump getting down Alexstrasza on curve, in my opinion.
he could just do the Faceless Corruptor on this turn, right? Corrupt the Diving Griffin. It's obviously not the perfect target, but it allows him to get 2 face, keep an awkward sized board at the very least.
If he gets that one, okay.
And then if he misses,
hits the Zixor, yeah, we look at Desert Spear instead.
Sounds good to me.
Much less pressure, but I think it's worth it for the 50-50 upside versus just a very awkward Varanus.
More than good enough here.
One turn of slowing down it is for Surrender. But Glory is not near quest completion, I think. Has played both Nether Breath. That picks up 1 Aranasi and a Worthless Imp. Or, no, sorry, the other Moarg as well.
which is nice. He is getting that little bit closer to the plot twist.
Huge, 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 huge.
I think you have to go for it here because it's denying you one of the Alexstrasas on the following turn, but it's just an 8/8, and you're very, very likely to be facing down Zixor Prime or Dragon Queen Alexstrasza or Dino Tamer Bran. He needs to get his own power plays rolling, and he needs to do it next turn.
Okay, we have entered the next phase of the game. Surrender. Gonna go for the curve play. Always scared of twisting Nether, but he oh my.
Whoa.
Wow, wow, wow.
Whoa!
Those are insane. Surrender plays Kill Command and Corrosive Breath in the deck, and Zephyrus, worthy to note.
So the only consideration is overextension here. What are you holding back in the fear of a board clear?
Well, definitely not the Waxadread, because that just goes right back into the deck after it gets cleared. And you can argue to put down the Malagos as well, just for even more health on the board, because you have Zixor for the follow-up. But contrary to when we criticized Frosty, I think, in this spot for holding on to Malagos, I think Surrender can afford to keep it in the back for now. Because just putting the Waxadread on board is tons of health on board.
Very reserved play, and I think rightly so. So if we were to start with a tap and then go Rain of Fire, he's still not quite clearing off the board with Dark Skies.
Yeah, I'm looking at Dark Skies into the Netherwing. You don't get in a tap, and it's also not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Sorry, it is 9 cards in hand. You're pretty sure 4 gets distributed along the smaller minion. So yeah, it's not good. It is not good. Gonna have to be the Double Skies. Gets the full clear here.
Oh, it feels so rough, though. You know there's another dragon in hand. I mean, he's praying it's like, I don't know, Deathwing? Because then he'd have to discard the rest of his hand, or Nazari?
He also knows it's either Faceless or Zixor in hand.
True.
And Surrender has that follow-up available. However, the Zixor unbuffed dies to Crazed Netherwing plus Rain of Fire. Is that reason to hold on to it, though?
I mean, I think it's a reasonable reason to hold on to it. If you go for Bone Wraith plus Evasive Feywing, you're still threatening a lot of damage, and it's slightly more awkwardly shaped.
That's true. Just because Feywing can't be targeted makes all the difference here. Granted, he is still asking Glory to have a 2-card combo here. Healing comes in clutch for Glory. Bear in mind, both Nether Breaths have been used. Zephyrus is active. Soulfire for 0?
That's lethal.
Are we looking at counter-lethal next turn? Yeah, we are. That's insane. Gonna use it for Ooze right now? Yeah, okay.
Holy
it's
Light,
still
sure.
most likely lethal. Yeah, okay. As long as Soulfire doesn't discard each other, still lethal.
Oh!
Doesn't get there though.
So Taunt, and then he can go Varanus as well and take out the Netherwing without even tanking any damage.
Correct. And at this point, you probably just drop the Mali to make the board a bit more threatening. There were arguments to dropping it last turn, actually, but then you're worried about Nether. But as far as we can see it, and Surrender can, there's no way for him to play around Malagos, Soulfire. It is all about whether Glory can dodge the super unfortunate outcome now. rubbing his hands together.
Look. Oh! He can't maximize his odds because he's not allowed to tap first.
Correct. After he plays Malygos and a Soulfire, 6 cards left, so 5 out of 6 times. Just takes this, and no shenanigans this time. No Zephrys or Soulfire discarded. That is game. Glory equalizes it in the unfavorable.
In the incredibly unfavorable, in my opinion, and against the best Highlander Hunter player that I think we have here in Asia Pacific. What a display there from Glory, taking some weird lines at all points along the way, and doing so in excellent fashion. I think that was a very, very impressive win there at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be denied. It was very fortunate for him to hit the Moarg double Nether Breath, where he looked to just be dead in the mid game. But it was very complex on how to actually survive and convert that healing into a win later on. And I think Glory handled it very well. Props to Surrender also finding board states that made Dark Skies as awkward as possible for Glory. But I do wonder about that Zixor turn and whether Malygos was supposed to be dropped alongside it. Or, like you said, the evasive Feywing plus the Bone Wraith.
Yeah, I mean, he was. There's so many things to play around, and that's the problem with Warlock deck. It's kind of similar to what you were saying about Savage Roar earlier on. You don't throw it out as the Druid because it's the threat of it that makes it so scary for your opponent. And it's kind of similar with Warlock. It's the threat of all the different kinds of removal that makes your opponent play so weird. Because if you're playing around Netherwing, you're maybe not playing around Rain of Fire. If you're playing around that, you're not playing around Dark Skies or the Nether Breath or the Moarg. So many different ways they can deal all the necessary damage that it is impossible to do so perfectly. And unfortunately, Surrender, his particular choice of cards to play around were not the one that Glory was representing in that hand. So it does mean we're equalized at 1 game apiece. Druid and Warlock having taken a win. Not necessarily the 2 decks you would expect at the start of this series, given the power of the Warlock and Demon Hunter. But now for Surrender Gia, with his Demon Hunter lined up against the Druid, I think he's got himself the 3rd favorable matchup in a row here in this series.
Surrender just has, I don't know, some pretty good Q order mind games. Seems like he lands favorable matchups pretty often here, and has I want to say okay selection of cards in the mulligan. Of course, we're going to see Chaos Strike and Eye Beam tossed away. Crimson Sigil Runner is definitely the definition of an okay card, especially when it's guaranteed as outcast value. However, you would much rather be playing other things on one, like that Battle Mage.
Right, I mean, before the nerf, when it was a 2-1, you were generally keeping that in most matchups, and even here, there's strong argument for it, because Druid doesn't want to hero power on turn 2. If they have it, they want to Fungal Fortunes on turn 2, but I agree with you. I think I was tossing that Sigil Runner, because you rather just hit it off the top later on.
But, wow. Glory has hit the Japan Druid. I don't know.
This is the absolute dream right now.
Really is. Like from Surrender, though, that he's held back on the coin Satyr Overseer plus Twin Slice, respecting the possibility of an early fungal, in which case you really want the coin to be able to power out the Warglaves.
And Glory here, even holding back on the alternate line, which was like draw with Rising Winds and then Crystal Power to go Vate into Glowfly, means that he has the answer to Satyr Overseer on this turn with Crystal Power, which if he didn't, may have been his undoing, with Coin Warglaive still available for Surrender.
Completely agree. Surrender played around the Glowfly early by holding onto Coin for Warglaves, but just can't have all his bases covered against what Glory has. Development plus removal. Oh, Surrender. Sorry, watching these 2 player camps in unison is very entertaining to me.
It really, really is. But this is the nightmare for Surrender, because you're supposed to win this matchup the vast majority of the time. He still may, to be fair. He's not out of the game completely. He's got Warglaves, but a complete clear on this turn. But I am hesitant to say that that will be enough in the face of Overflow and Mount Seller already in hand.
Gonna have to use every last charge of this Warglaves as well. which means that getting through the Mount Cellar, even if it's the play this turn, it's gonna be a bit difficult.
I mean, I wonder if you just play out the Mount Cellar on this turn.
Right.
How does Surrender kill it?
I mean, if you're trading a 2/2 and killing another 2/2,
Yeah.
that means Surrender needs to have 7 damage on turn 5. I don't think there's a combination that lets him do that.
I mean, it's second Warglaives, really, along with the
Yeah.
second Slice that allows him to do that, which is something to consider playing around. But I love this from Glory, because if that isn't there, this is just runaway.
Completely agreed. Especially since if there even is second Warglaives, then you just follow up with Overflow fine.
Exactly.
Oh, and the taunt as well means Surrender can't just second slice into a face and then remove that. He has to tank more damage. Oh, it's a disaster.
I grow impatient.
Absolute disaster for Surrender, but for Glory, turning this matchup on its head is such a swing in his advantage. If he can close this one out, the Druid was looking to quite heavily suffer, I feel like, against the Demon Hunter and arguably the Hunter as well.
It's looking so bad for Surrender now that I feel like he has to just ship damage face. I don't even think that gets there, to be honest, but he can't kill the Mount Cellar this turn. You can set up to kill it over 2 turns, say second slice Glavebound now into Metamorphosis, shoot it next turn, but everything just seems like a disastrous play. It's just not there.
It's very clearly saying, if you have Overflow, I'm losing the game no matter what, because you can partially damage the Mount Cellar on this turn, but then if it's healed back up, you're basically just conceding. Yeah.
Like he's gonna get rid of the Grizzly instead, try to have the 6/4 as a body, be better shaped to challenge the Mount Cellar. Looks like a slightly more reasonable line, but hello? Trade Overflow, Moonfire?
I'm not even sure if Overflow is the best play. I think it might just be like double Rising Winds plus Soul of the Forest on this turn. Either one wins. Like, you're just so far in the lead here.
Huge disaster for Surrender, especially since the last deck that Glory has is the Warrior.
Yeah.
Toughest matchup for Demon Hunter to get through.
And what a way that would be for us to end this first season of Grandmasters Gia with the 2 most dominant decks over the entire course of this metagame clashing against each other.
From 2 of the most dominant players in APAC as well. And they're
Glory just
probably gonna I beam away this 3/3, but it's still there for Glory. Savage Roar, Power of the Wild.
just doesn't matter. 1 game away now, he is, from going through to the World Championship later on this year. Oh,
Okay, Glory.
just for good measure.
It is just his day. It's just his season. You know what? Glory has just had an incredible run throughout every portion of Grandmasters this season. It's not over yet, but he is in a great spot, especially since it's just Warrior remaining.
Gia, this is Glory's world. He just allows us to live in it here. It's with his permission that we exist and get to cast his series of Hearthstone, because what a dominant performance for this entire season. And as you said, the Warrior, the last remaining deck. This has been the downside of Surrender's strategy is, of course, banning out the Demon Hunter. You don't have to face that, as would arguably be even more disastrous for his decks. But it means he is left with the Warrior, a very difficult deck to pilot for sure. And in this highest of pressure situations, will Glory be able to keep the cool head that you need to be able to pilot this deck well?
From what we know of Glory, he seems to make careless mistakes when he's down rather than when he's up. I think when he's feeling the momentum, you just really see it snowballing, and he just has that confidence in his plays, which is a really important thing. We talk about the mental pressure and the ability to stay level-headed and evaluate your plays objectively outside of the emotions. And I think Glory is able to do that when he's feeling a little bit more safe.
Now!
And this is definitely a matchup that you do feel safe in with a double 1-drop opener if he wants it.
It's not bad at all. Even the Bomb Wrangler is like not a terrible way to get things going and fight back in the early game, but instead he's looking for some more of those power cards to find in the early game, Gia.
I'd agree. Definitely want the Corsair cache. The first Sky Raider is nice on curve, but after that, I think he'd rather be scaling up instead of wide. And Surrender's hand, 2 pairs. Disaster!
Agreed. You know, it's not the perfect hand you're looking for. Frozen Shadow Weaver, however, can be a very strong card in the matchup. He just needs a little bit of help here, and I think he can turn this hand around.
Okay, but that generated pirate from Glory is huge as well. Horde Pillager, bring him back another live fire lance. Ooh, okay.
Or another Anchor.
Oh! Not for this turn, but he just has everything he needs.
Ooh, okay, that is an interesting top deck.
Very interesting.
Hasn't seen Corsair cache, so he's obviously not guaranteed to have a weapon at this point, but even if you're to go Satyr Overseer triple Twin Slice, which even ignoring the consequences for Glavebound on turn 5 later on, it's just not that it's not that likely that your board sticks around.
Correct. The bomb could just snipe the Satyr, and I don't hate the look of Frozen Shadow Weaver here. Still probably just freezing space to respect the possibility of a weapon. It lines up decently against the Bomb Wrangler. You could freeze a minion to instead respect the possibility of Inner Rage, which Surrender makes that call. And yeah, since he knows the weapons aren't buffed up, no individual one can get rid of the Shadow Weaver. Glory has Inner Rage to deal with this.
Yeah, I love as well that he's going for the Anchor here. You want to get the Pirates, you want to get that Pirate in particular with the Risky Skipper. It's been the bane of Demon Hunter ever since these two decks started clashing.
And now the Satyr player you're talking about is available while still holding onto a slice, but he sees the weapon now. It feels so terrible, but also playing the Shadow Weaver off curve feels terrible.
All I see is weakness.
At the very least, he's saying with this, you're going to be tanking a lot of damage, and what this is saying to me, Gia, is the crucial point in so many in this matchup that you often find with Demon Hunter is saying, you know what, if you've got the Armor Smith, well done, you're probably winning this game. But if you don't, you are going to be tanking a lot of damage before you can clear this board. And at that point, Surrender has a chance to wrestle this one back.
Definitely looks that way because Glory is having no shortage of value here. Re-equip Anchor if he wants. Or could have just played the Korkron actually for better board presence. I was interested in that. Granted, he does know there's another slice in hand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is still fairly weak to second slice plus Glavebound, but that's like an extra layer that's added on before you're especially weak to it.
So we could just see Glavebound this turn. So 2-2 into 4-2. Second slice, Glavebound face. The alternative, though, is using this I-Beam while it's guaranteed on the right side of the hand. So we could see Hero Power on the bomb after the 2-2 goes face, I-Beam and freeze face. There's a chance you stick the 2-2 in that situation. And a 4-3, not insignificant. So I like going for a bit more patience here from Surrender.
I think it's very smart. I think it's good for a couple of reasons. As you said, right now, it's just powerful because it's likely to stick something on board, especially after that goes face. That's fine. And it also means he has better mana expenditure next turn. He spent all his mana this turn, he can spend it all next turn, and then curve into the Skull of Gul'dan afterwards to try and wrestle enough damage to take this game, because Glory still doesn't have that Armor Smith.
And the freeze is very relevant here so that Glory can't draw another cheap pirate. However, this is still enough minions to get down that Blood Boiled Brute for the swing. Lines up perfectly though with Surrender's removal option.
It really does.
Oh, he can even commit the Battle Fiend in second slice.
It's again that thing where it dies to the weapon, but are you happy just because you get the damage face at that point?
I would answer yes.
Mm.
The way I'm viewing it is, what is the upside of this Twin Slice in hand with nothing else to immediately benefit with it versus, you know, forcing Glory to have to swing into the Battle Fiend and take the damage?
I mean, my answer to that would be that you already at this point, I think, have to start considering Altruist, where every single activation can be huge. But even in that instance, you're getting a couple of extra points of damage, whereas getting this Battle Fiend down now probably evens that out. So I'm a fan of using it.
Orcron can answer with Gravebound very cleanly, but Surrender has at least the perfect remaining card to try and put together more value.
Start with the Skull. I mean, unless you want to hit exactly... Ooh, maybe you don't start with the Skull, because you can hit Warglaives or Glavebound here.
Yeah. Oh, it's really rough.
I grow impatient.
Whereas on the one mana option, it's only like Kayn and Altruist
you're right.
that you're hitting.
Yeah,
I like starting with the Sigil Runner.
Very well thought out from Surrender. That little bit of hesitation turns out he hit that outcome, but doesn't mean he went for the incorrect play, of course.
Of course.
This is a high value hand, but we're getting to the point now where Glory can start turning on the pressure. Look at this, just the Captain Greenskin.
I mean, what are you even going for here? The Warmwall plus Bloodsworn is obviously the highest board control option, but you want to start killing your opponent pretty quickly here, I think.
I would agree. This Ankar going face is, I think, going to get the other Skipper. Guaranteed. So we could have even seen a very aggressive use of Skipper there. Just Skipper plus the Captain Greenskin.
Well,
sorry, it wouldn't have worked. Yeah. Correct. Never mind. Oh
my god. It's so close to you. Surrender can still get there.
I mean, he has a clear available, doesn't have to tank the 4 if he doesn't want to, but I think he needs to send as much damage face as possible as well. Just not respect the possibility for Rampage.
I mean, he's seen Glory's, I believe, one and only copy of Corcoran. Obviously, there's still Grom in the deck, but he needs to play fast and loose with his health total here, I think, if he wants to take the game.
Thinking about a lethal setup over several turns. I like getting the Kayn down with the Adept this turn as opposed to fitting in a hero power for more damage. Okay, that's always happening.
Yep.
So if he swings two, one into minion, one into face, he can technically set up a 2-turn lethal.
Yep.
Should a minion stick, and he's presented 2 of them. Oh, that's a Grom, but no activation.
Oh, it's so close.
It's 1 mana off. I mean, doesn't Surrender just have it now? His Glory's best way to remove the board is just Grom into 6/4, but then Kayn survives. There's no armor up mana, and so Kayn hero power.
He can go live wire Lance for Spell Lackey to hit like sword and board.
Yeah,
that's his best chance.
Yeah, I think so. There wasn't any cheap minions to go for Risky Skipper. It's a taunt!
But it's
not Kayn's
active!
Alive! Can he kill the Kayn somehow with the Risky Skipper?
It always just survives at 1, right?
Yeah,
Unless
it's not there.
Risky Skipper, and then he can copy the Risky Skipper? It's just not enough time. He doesn't have enough mana.
Yeah, because the risky, you'd have to play the Lackey first in order to damage it. Surrender's done it! Oh my gosh!
He can hardly believe it himself. I mean, honestly, I
He's
wouldn't
like,
be surprised
"Hands
at the
off."
moment is if he's asking the admins, like, am I allowed to kill my opponent here? Did Glory disconnect? That's the
Yeah.
only reason I think why he's not getting through here. Obviously,
Yeah.
we can see, as I hope he just got the all clear, Glory just didn't have enough time and there was no way out there to save himself. But Gia, it all comes down now to this one final game.
That was insane. So well played from Surrender. From Glory, we had a couple questions as to whether he could put on more pressure at certain points, but I think overall the game plan made a lot of sense. And, props to Surrender for, I think it's very reasonable that you assume he was asking the admins there with the hesitation, even in a situation like that, in a game that could mean you have another shot at making it to Worlds.
Yeah.
He's doing the honorable thing. Love to see it.
Indeed, he's been around the block a few times in terms of competitive Hearthstone, and he doesn't want to take a cheap win against his opponent there, especially such a worthy opponent as Glory. But I think it was just so well played there by Surrender in particular. Glory, as with any Warrior game, there's so many different questions you have to ask, and even if they do play perfectly, it's very difficult to realize that as casters. But I think that Surrender had a very clear game plan right from the get-go. It was launch everything through to the face, play very riskily, take as much damage as possible in order to deal as much damage as possible along the way, and say, if you got the Armor Smith, congratulations, I'm not winning this game anyway, so I'm just going to try and play to the out where you don't have it. And that's the world he lived in, and it's the world that is seeing him through to Game 5 here, with the last matchup being the Highlander Hunter for the final deck for Surrender, up against, once again, the Warrior.
Yes, I mean, of all of the crazy things that happened in that matchup with the Frozen Shadow Weavers and the opener and no 1 or 2 drop, I still think my favorite thing I saw was the Crimson Sigil Runner before Skull, which seems so innocuous, but you brought up a great point, like recognizing what breakpoints the Skull discount actually gives you for immediate impact versus what the Crimson Sigil Runner could give you and then still be able to play the Skull. It's a minor optimization, but I love to see it from Surrender. And now, as you said, we end up with one of the most contentious matchups in the meta as to who is exactly favored. Our data would have it that Warrior is an immense favorite, but as you said, Surrender is one of the best pilots of Highlander Hunter. And I think in ladder stats and a bigger sample size, it is not that far skewed in favor of Warrior.
I agree. And I think if we were to ask Surrender what his thought was on the Warrior versus the Hunter, there's a very good chance he would say, I think the Warrior is still favored. I just think it's less favored against the Hunter than the Demon Hunter is, which is a big part of why he's banning away the Demon Hunter instead of the Warrior. Taking a look at both of these players' lists just one last time, of course, Surrender has cut the secret package, which he was running for quite a few weeks. And outside of that, it's just a very bog standard version of the deck indeed. He's not playing the escaped Mana Saber that some of the players have gone for to have maximum consistency with the Beasts and Scavenger's Ingenuity. It's more the Warrior list for Glory that I think is a little bit interesting.
Yes, indeed. I guess we haven't discussed Warrior lists in a very long time because we just don't get to see Warrior very often, but this is still the egg version we saw in last game. He has Serpent Egg, but just one copy alongside the Terran Gorfian, the one of Korkron Elite, and fitting in the Grom at the top end there. The notable inclusion is Captain Greenskin, I would say, a pirate that a lot of the Warrior players have cut from their list to maximize the efficiency of drawing into Risky Skipper.
Yeah, it's fairly unfashionable, the Captain Greenskin, I think it's fair to say at this point, because you want to be hitting the card draw. Sorry, you want to be drawing into your Risky Skippers as much as possible, and therefore you don't want to have added pirates in there. But it is far from a disastrous card, even if it's not what you really want in this matchup.
Tosses back the Skipper in the opener, definitely agree with that, but gets one back. It's not a great hand for Glory. No Corsair Cash. Livewire at the very least gives him a way to answer a Fairy Dragon should it come down on turn 2. But Surrender's hand is looking pretty spicy, at least the middle 2 cards in my opinion.
I am liking the look of this hand very, very much indeed. Stormhammer, I think, can be a premium card in the matchup, with obviously there being no weapon removal in the Warrior's arsenal, and also just the fact that it functions so well as either removal or infinite damage to just start killing them.
Stormhammer is just better than a minion, right? You need an ooze to destroy it, but every turn it can attack once. Love it. Right, the real sticking point here is also Surrender's other inclusions in the list, I would say. We've seen people put Injured Tolvir, but I think that's quickly been cut in favor of the Bone Chewer Brawler. Surrender also has Frozen Shadow Weaver, and he's drawn amazing ways to fill out the curve.
He really has. Glory's hand is very reactive rather than proactive, but it has the makings of a hand that could do some incredibly powerful stuff. And he does just start off by throwing out the Armor Smith here.
As far as Hunter compared to Demon Hunter, I think it's reasonable to assume that by the time you have the mana to go for the Risky Skipper Armor Smith turn, you're not necessarily clearing things on their side of the board. They tend to have higher health minions. And so, Glory is using the Armor Smith while it has more significant board presence immediately. Surrender, praying for the Huffer, gets the Leok. Misha would have been better here too, but that's the worst.
Yeah, that is pretty far and away the worst one here.
You even bop this. The argument for bopping is if you see a weapon come down this turn, so at least it's up to the point that just Leok can deal with it. But Surrender has his own weapon to follow up.
I just think Surrender wants to be playing nice and aggressive here. With the Stormhammer in hand, every point of damage that he can get to the opponent's face is crucial.
The Griffin is an interesting draw. Of course, you do want to get the Stormhammer online, but he doesn't have a dragon to get all the free hits.
True.
Griffin, if it hits Zixor, is kind of disastrous because I think he would hit it from the Scavenger's Ingenuity. This is, in my opinion, the better outcome, getting the Faceless Corruptor.
Fair enough. Can just save Stormhammer for next turn, likely, and then into Rot Nest Drake thereafter. If he can find another dragon, would be absolutely huge.
Yeah.
For now, Glory still left with this kind of slow curve. He's just going to have to patter along, hoping he can survive for the moment. And Skyvatir is a great way to pass the time until he gets through to his powerful plays later on.
Minion with stealth cannot taunt.
Thanks, Innkeeper.
Okay, we can see Surrender fish for the Zixor and just... it feels bad to rip a Corrosive Breath, but the curve is just kind of awkward. I also don't mind pre-equipping Stormhammer, especially since he's following up with the Rot Nest.
The mana seems to be spoken for the next few turns, and it just looks so beautiful with Dragon into Dragon as two potential plays.
Question is if he swings this into a mid. Okay, I like this. I was gonna say, I like the look of taking both trades to keep the board as narrow as possible to give your Rot Nest Drake the best chance of sniping something you wanted to snipe. Between the two options of things that could have killed a minion there, I'm surprised it was the Stormhammer and not the Leok, actually. Stealth here, pretty nutty for Glory. Manages to get a guaranteed target.
Oh! The decision to go for the taunt the previous turn is working out tremendously for him here.
Oh. Man. If it had been Desert Spear last turn instead of Stormhammer, this would be a completely different game, but as Surrender, you just rip the Rot Nest, hope to land the 2 and 5. Oh.
I mean, I wonder if you rip the Desert Spear on this turn, you can go, in order to set up for Varanus, on the following turn, you can go Corrosive Breath plus Desert Spear, take out 2 of these minions.
Okay.
And then you're looking at a clear next turn, potentially, or at least a clear of the important minions.
Yeah, Rot Nest is definitely the worst here. There's option C, actually, of Scavengers into Zixor, which trades the Skyvatir really cleanly, and then allows him to Stormhammer down the Bloodsworn Mercenary. But again, it puts him farther off from the big swing turns, which is not just Varanus, like you mentioned, but also the Faceless Corruptor.
Yeah.
I can get behind the Desert Spear. Painful to override a charge, but I think it is A necessary evil.
Needs to set up for a powerful swing turn, and this is the sacrifice that you have to make in order to reap that advantage later on.
Blood Boil Brute active just as 5-8 here, but Rampage
Ooh.
on a huge taunt.
And of course, Glory has to be considering Varanus as, like, you know,
Yes.
your opponent just overrode a weapon on the previous turn. What could that possibly be setting up for? Why is that good? Varanus is the answer. In which case, making one big taunt minion does at the very least mean they have to face tank it with the spear first of all.
Yeah, nothing here protects big minions from being eaten by Varanus Desert
Yeah.
Spear, but he can at least make it more painful for Surrender by going for the Rampage, as opposed to the Blood Boil.
Yeah.
Gets to stick a 110, which becomes a 1-1. Oh, how miserable.
Could of course leave it stealth, but then it's still becoming a 1 health minion, right, that has to attack in at some point before it does anything.
It's huge, though, having to take 12 damage for Surrender there across 2 turns.
Huge.
There's a Grom in hand and the Skipper. Glory can just wait till turn 9.
Oh, it's so close, Gia.
Incredibly close, but it has to be Varanus here, right?
That's what I'm seeing.
Rot Nest, of course, if you hit the 1 in 4, it's huge, but I don't think this is a bad enough situation for Surrender that he has to take a 1 in 4. And if it misses, he essentially just loses the follow-up.
I think the better plan is just to pray that your opponent's hand doesn't kill you.
So, of course, he'll be going down to 9, removes 2 additional from the board, so he has to be scared of 7 from hand in the immediate. That's beyond Korkron Inner Fire. Inner Rage. Considering every possible situation and, of course, what the plan is on the follow-up. But, of course, I think this is 100% the right play. Whoa!
These are good cards here for Glory. Very, very good cards.
But he has to be scared of dying also.
Oh my
Surrender
god.
just is presenting a 7 attack
Oh
minion.
my god.
I mean, Zephyrus, Dino Tamer, Bran. If he
So he
doesn't
can go-
armor up, Bran is just lethal, right?
Skipper, Bomb Wrangler. Double hit face first, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Skipper, Bomb Wrangler. He's then got 3 mana left, which means he can't play the Blood Boil Brute.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
Oh.
Oh.
So he has to just play the Blood Boil and trade in? Unless he just wants to risk it and not and just go for lethal on your opponent.
I mean, yes, I think that is more sensible than giving up your own lethal to play around a card you're not sure is there.
Yeah, as long as he hero powers as well, he's not dying to Bran.
Yeah, big deal. I was wondering if he's setting up the Skipper for Grom on curve. Yeah,
Sure.
like that. And even if it's not activated by Skipper, Surrender just dies to Grom and Weapon. But the Ooze, oh my gosh. He has a full clear now, alongside the Weapon.
No way. Is that what he needed to stay alive?
But he also has to trade, right? The
He has to
Varanus
trade if
into
he wants to live.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He
Trade?
has to trade because if he bonks it, then he's just dead to Grom.
No, wait.
So-
He's still just dead, right? Because he can't attack him with the 1/1. He can only clear 3 minions, not 4.
So he just transforms the Ooze, right? Instead of the 1/1.
Oh my god, you're right. Oh!
Ah!
Oh!
Or the Varanus, but like obviously Ooze here. Ah! This is so close, Derek. Insanely close, but you have to think it's not just Grom that he's playing around. It's also
Yeah.
Korkron.
Right.
The 5 versus 4 breakpoint is huge. He starts the turn by attacking face. I think Surrender sees it. This is insane! But the Varanus trade is the big one. Is he gonna go for it? Oh, he does it! Oh my god! And now, for Glory, can he prevent automatic lethal on the other side? He can Blood Boil to get rid of the Varanus.
Mm-hmm.
He can Anchor, set up a 2-turn of his own. Oh, Surrender's so scared. He made the right play for the situation.
Drink your blood. Eat
Crack! Surrender.
Looking at Zephyrus,
leads
Dino Tamer
Zephyrus.
Bran. Ah, that's not it.
The freeze isn't enough. Drawing the Zixor isn't enough.
Got so close. He played so well there around
Oh.
Glory's outs, but it's not going to be enough.
That was an unbelievable read to make there from Surrender to stay alive and to have an out for the game here to even have a chance.
Truly, truly well played to Surrender, but we cannot discount Glory's achievements to make it this far. Surrender is going to do his best and pray that the Grom is not there, but I'm pretty sure he's 90% sure or higher that it is.
He's praying. Maybe Glory was bluffing. Maybe he doesn't have it, but we can see from the relief on Glory's face that he has done it, Gia. At the final moment, 1 damage off lethal on the previous turn, but now Surrender does fall down. And Glory is our representative from Asia Pacific going to the World Championships later this year.
Oh my gosh, what a series, Tarek. That was incredible. Huge congratulations to Glory. It means so much to him. And the level of emotion we're seeing from him, it's infectious. You know, I feel so hyped. Glory had that amazing run through Swiss, dethroning Surrender himself in terms of the top point earners. He had the most dominant performance, 6-in-1 in the round robin, and now he is making it all the way to the World Championships later on. Huge congratulations, a very worthy representative of APAC, and I'm sure the whole Japanese community is so proud of him.
I'm sure they are as well, and he should be proud of himself as well. Taking a look at the bracket, we can see how things did shake out, but just to even exemplify your point even more, Glory was the #1 point earner during the Swiss. He finished first during the round robin, and then in the final week of the playoffs, he also comes out on top there. Every single possible opportunity he's had to prove himself, he has done it along the way here. This is one of the most dominant displays I think we're going to see for a long while in Grandmasters.
Was an amazing streak, and while we have had our qualms and questions about Glory's plays here and there, I think this weekend was really, really neat. We were singing Surrender's praises for making that amazing read. It reminded me of that time he played around Unleash the Hounds, I don't know how many years ago, by taking a great trade. But that's not to discredit how well Glory played. He was trying to set up that Grom lethal. He took that trade to make sure there wasn't counter lethal, and all the steps along the way in the lineup preparation and all of the strategy. I think Glory is definitely representative of the creme de la creme here in APAC. Happy to see him go through.
Absolutely. And just as a shout out to all 4 of our top 4 representatives here, I want to say that aside from, 3 of them being Japanese players, all of them being very strong, I think one of the real things that binds all of these players together is their enjoyment of the game, how invested they are in it. You can see from what it means to them that it's clear the amount of practice they must be putting in to get to this level. They are not apathetic about it. They really, really care. And that is an incredibly strong driving force that puts them through to these very, very strong Hearthstone players. So congratulations to Glory. We will be seeing him later on this year in the World Championships. I cannot wait. And of course, all of the other players who we saw today in the playoffs, we will be seeing next season as well for their chance to take the title of the second player going through to the World Championships.
Indeed. And while we do end the day on the high note, of course, I want to extend my commiserations to Staz, Samuel Tsao, and Frosty, our 3 relegated players. Put on a great show for us this season and in past seasons. But of course, we do have to make room for new blood in APAC, largely determined by who will be performing well in the Masters Tour events. The next one will be next weekend.
That is right. Well, we are done here for Asia Pacific Grandmasters Season 1. Sadly, you're not rid of me and Gia quite yet, because next week we will be coming back with Masters Tour Yongchiping, of course, to be held online, given the current situation. And it will be here, broadcast on the Hearthstone Esports YouTube page. You're going to see many of the faces that you've come to know and love over the course of Grandmasters, as well as many of the players you may be less well known to, trying to fight for their spot here in Grandmasters. It's going to be a fantastic week of competition, and I can't wait to get my teeth into just an individual tournament. Everyone starts off on an even playing field, and only the best can rise to the top.
Indeed. So, because it is the last day, I want to extend my sincerest thanks to everybody who tuned in, whether you just saw us at the finals or were there from the very first week. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, especially during a very difficult time in the world right now, global pandemic and, important protests as well. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, it really does mean a lot to us. It's the dream come true for me and Gia. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and giving us your time. We will be seeing you next week, as we said, for Masters Tour Yongchiping. But for now, we're going to send you over to Raven and Sottle with Europe. And then, of course, Doa and Frodan with Americas shortly afterwards. Sorry, I'm just too excited now. I can't even speak properly anymore. I just want to say one final congratulations to Glory and, of course, all of the players who helped him to make it happen. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week, and enjoy Europe for now.